This is Tim.
And Mulele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele, sheltering in place in Tokyo. How are you?
I'm good. And you?
Okay. Yeah, what day is this? Oh, I guess we're recording on Wednesday. Okay.
Oh, now I know.
Yeah, so this is Critiquing Comics, but I don't know what's been going on with the queue. I mean, things just don't come in. Please send us your comics. But in the meantime, we went looking for some comics, and we both kind of ended up looking on Webtoon. I actually looked around some other places, like Googled for lists of quote-unquote good webcomics, and I found some webcomics, but I didn't think any of them were good. I don't know, part of it was just maybe not for me, because they all seemed to be kind of for teens or 20-somethings, or they were like fantasy, and I'm not really into that genre, or I don't know, or there's one I would kind of like to talk about in the future about the problems that it had. But anyway, that's for another time. So Mulele found one called Moon You by I suppose this is pronounced Cho Seok, Korean name. Started March 21st, 2018, and still going on. How did you happen to find this, or what attracted you to it?
Well, I was looking for science fiction comics because I wanted to read something like that. And this one was the first one I hit upon that the art style looked kind of okay. I could deal with it. It's a little bit reminiscent of One Punch Man, artistically, and lots of bald characters. But I read the first chapter and thought, man, this is an interesting idea. Let's see where it goes. And then I recommended it to you, and here we are.
Yeah, and as we're recording this, I just finished episode 31. I guess I got through more of it than you did, but
yeah, I finished episode 9.
Yeah, well, I was interested because I felt like the art style doesn't telegraph what kind of comic it is.
Yeah, not really.
And I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I mean, clearly it was science fiction from the beginning. There's this moon base, and they were supposed to protect Earth from a meteor by breaking it apart, which they did, but a piece of, one or more pieces of it still hit the Earth and screwed up a lot of stuff. And this one guy is left there on the moon, and he thinks that no one is alive on Earth anymore. And it felt like it was going to be kind of a horror thing or creepy, and sometimes it is, but then some of the scenes have really funny resolutions. I laughed quite a bit reading this.
So did I, actually, and it was unexpected. It's like you're dealing with this kind of hard situation, and then suddenly the most ridiculous shit starts to happen. The suicide attempts were the first part where I laughed. Which is really dark, but
yeah, it's kind of dark humor, but yeah,
it was good. Just the image of him with a noose around his helmet as he's trying to commit suicide in space. Then he jumps off a building, and the gravity is shallow, so he just floats to the bottom. And it's just ridiculous shit like that. Yeah, I can understand. This is. I mean, there are some easier ways to die on the moon, but yeah, the fact that he's a coward about it also understandable, and yeah, very, very humorous, actually.
Yeah, so having read as far as I have, it's getting to the point where they're starting to reveal, more and more about the background and what's really going on, quote unquote.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, it's the first few chapters was just kind of focused on the one guy, and it feels
Yeah.
like kind of a very small universe, but it really expands as it goes.
Mm. Yeah. The the thing that was really interesting was that there are a lot of twists,
Mm-hmm.
at least in the first nine chapters, which kind of expand the situation in really really good ways. I kind of want to be careful about spoilers because the
Yeah.
twists are quite good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but how much do you want to say? I guess if you get to chapter, like we're currently, there are 66 chapters available to read,
Mm.
and each chapter is kind of long,
Mm-hmm.
or at least I felt it was long. They got through a lot of material per chapter, so somewhere around chapter 5, and spoiler for anyone who doesn't want to know, um, he discover or he doesn't discover, but we're told that some of Earth survived, and there are people who are watching this guy on the moon, kind of still believing he's the last person alive in the universe, go about his daily business. And that is the first twist, and it makes an incredibly interesting setup for what comes next. It's kind of dramatic, but it's also kind of sitcom-y.
Mm-hmm.
And where it starts to go by the time I finished reading was quite interesting. I do have to admit, there were a couple of points where I was a little bit confused as to what actually happened.
Yeah, I was a little confused at points also.
So, for example, he had this one idea. He realizes that his spacesuit is cracked, and he has to get from the habitation unit to the main, the common area where all the food is. And the only way to do that is to do a moonwalk to the other area. It's a very short distance, but still, you're basically on the moon, so you have to wear a spacesuit.
Yeah.
And he gets into an escape pod, and the escape pod is set up so that it jettisons you out in this small sphere, and then the other people come and pick you up. He's like, okay, it'll jettison me out, and that'll push me forward, and I'll have 30 minutes of oxygen to reach out and touch the panel on the other door and let myself in. He gets out in the pod and then realizes that he can't put his hand outside of the pod because he's in space. Dumb as all get out, and even the character realizes that he's an idiot. In fact, he says, yeah, I'm an idiot. And it's very, very quick. But how he solves that problem was never really clear to me.
Yeah.
They don't go into a lot of detail in the setup, not a lot of detail in the resolution. And this kind of happens a couple of places.
Mm-hmm.
Where things kind of happen and then other things get started.
Yeah, well, in fact, I got confused at that point where I got the impression somehow that his pod had fallen to Earth, which wasn't what happened. It was just the kind of the camera, quote unquote, was zooming in on Earth to change scenes. But yeah, you're right. It was never clear how he managed to actually open the door.
Yeah. And actually, to be honest, I was thinking a lot of 2001 during that scene, where he doesn't have the ability to. I forget the name of the astronaut in 2001, but there's a scene where Hal has locked him out and he doesn't have the ability to get in because he's got no helmet and he can't do a spacewalk. Do you remember the scene?
Oh, vaguely. It's been a long time since I saw it.
Yeah. It's the scene with the famous "Open the pod bay doors, Hal" line. But anyway, I was kind of thinking about that during that scene, and actually, there are a lot of points where I felt there was more science in this science fiction than a lot of Hollywood fare,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's why it kind of pushed me towards that vision of 2001, that there was a real problem and that he was looking for real solutions and dealing with the science of the situation. Even though we get no resolution or no clear resolution for that, he was still trying to deal with what it actually was. There are a couple of MacGuffins here. MacGuffins, I'm not exactly sure if that's correct, but there are a couple of things here which seem like forced setups.
Hmm.
The thing with the 2 second delay on the satellite for the broadcast of
Uh.
yeah, that was a bit of I'm not believing this one quite.
A little too convenient.
Well, the results of the situation of that scenario were incredibly funny, and I found the humor was kind of a cure-all for any of the problems that I had with the narrative setup.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that the broadcast is going through the American satellite, but they had no way of controlling its beam. So although they had a 2 second delay on it, that eventually everybody would get it.
Yeah, that kind of strained my credulity too. That there would be no way for them to. It was all or nothing. It was everybody on Earth could see it, or nobody could see it, including the people who supposedly controlled these things.
Yeah, that just seemed a little bit too too weird.
Yeah.
But still, I'll let it go in the name of good writing. Otherwise, and really interesting premise and some unexpected comedy. Without spoiling too much for me, how do you feel about what you've read?
Well, yeah, like you said, there's plenty of science in it. Hopefully, I mean, I can't even tell if it's accurate or not, but hopefully, Cho Seok is up on the science aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of reminding me of, and this is in a manga style, and it sort of reminds me of my favorite manga, Full Metal Alchemist. In that it kind of starts out focused on, in this case, one character, and gradually kind of builds and builds and builds in a way that keeps you engaged in it. With expanding the cast and the scope of it, and but also the humor to it. Now there a few. It's a translation from Korean, I take it. And sometimes the translation is a little wonky, or there'll be typos.
Mm-hmm.
And also, did you notice all of the I's are serifed? We talked about this issue in another episode a month or two ago. So, for the personal pronoun I, that's fine, but it really messed up my eyes on words that had a T and an I together, because it started to look like two T's.
Yeah. I kind of felt like he was shouting the whole time. But the other thing was the font choice for the comic within the comic. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the font choice there.
Well, the C's look like parentheses.
Oh yeah,
I was having a lot of problems with that at first. I could barely read that shit. Eventually it worked out, but still, the font choices here or the lettering style is a little off. But if you can get past that, yeah, the read is good.
Also, well, as it goes on, there are a lot of flashback scenes, and sometimes there's a lot of jumping back and forth between the present situation and the flashback. And reading it on my computer particularly, I think when I read some on my phone, I saw it was easier to notice. But, there's that manga convention of having black in the gutters for a flashback.
Mm-hmm.
And, Western comic readers, I think, are not used to getting information out of the color of the gutters.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took me a minute to, oh, wait a minute, some of this is flashback. I need to back up a little bit and get kind of sorted out what's happening now and what happened in the past.
Right.
And, if I read it on my computer, it's formatted for a phone, and so there's a lot of white space on both sides. So that kind of worked against the black gutters. But yeah, you have to kind of be aware of that convention or else you'll get really confused.
Yeah, I think he used a little bit of that in the beginning where he talks about how they built up to the incident that destroys the Earth. I couldn't tell how much of it was his own imagining, because there's this one scene of this asteroid smacking the middle of the planet and it just cracking like an egg, and like yellow fire just splits out from everything. And it's like, oh shit, the Earth has been destroyed. But that's not exactly what happened. It was a very small piece. What do you say, 1/11th of the comet?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we actually learn the reality of it, we see that it hit the ocean, not the land.
Yeah.
Which caused the sea level to rise quite a bit, but it didn't destroy the Earth like he originally imagined, or like that first picture showed. So it's kind of a mixture of flashback, his imagination, and he's narrating throughout. And so it for me at points it was a little bit confusing, but you kind of sort it out in your mind afterwards what the timeline is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you didn't have any problems in like the first 2 chapters?
Not that I remember. No, I don't think I was too confused there.
Okay.
But the other thing is, showing this Earth recovering from a major disaster kind of feels like now.
Well, we're not quite in recovery yet.
Right, but it's hard not to think of, like, as they're talking about that the Earth has changed and a lot of things have been lost. It kind of feels like this is us a year from now or something. Yeah, it's a little on the nose right now.
A little bit. I don't know. Maybe
this started 2 years ago, but
maybe this comic is a little bit hard for a pandemic read. I don't know. I didn't consider it that way. So basically, the situation in Japan is much lighter than the situation in the States. So even during lockdown, I'm not constantly aware of how dangerous the situation is. I think we have something like 1,500 infected and less than 100 dead.
Yeah, I think it's still under 100. Where it's gone way over that in the States. Yeah,
the States. My God. So maybe the situation of this comic is a little bit dark for pandemic reading, but otherwise, I'm quite enjoying it.
Yeah.
You said it's not finished?
No, actually, it has ended. It ended in June 2019.
Okay.
With episode 66. So
okay.
Yeah, it is over. So if you have the time, you can get to the end of the story.
Oh, well, that's fortunate. I am curious, but it's going to be one of those things where I read a couple chapters a day. This is, for me at least, not a read it all at once book. In fact, the 9 chapters I read over 2 days, so not expecting to be quite that long. Yeah. I must say, the plotting and the writing are pretty well structured.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from a few of the problems that we had with resolutions, which kind of end like gags. In plotting, there's the introduction to the problem, then an expansion on that problem, and then and the expansion can come in the form of a twist, which it does, and then other twists along the way that keep expanding it. And so I'm not sure how much the artist planned this comic, what parts kind of followed flights of fancy or what was strictly structured. But so far, it seems like he had a very, very good plan and very complete idea before going into this. Because it really doesn't have any big time wasters where you can see the artist kind of edging up to this idea and then he executes. The twists come quick and they kind of irrevocably expand the comic. And because I don't see him coming, I didn't think it would be that kind of comic. And the idea that he's alone on the moon, it's like, okay, this is going to be a short comic. So I think in this way, it's built a kind of trust in me that the comic will continue to be satisfying as I read through. Mm-hmm. If I get to the end, maybe I'll report back to give my final thoughts of the comic and where it went. Maybe a spoiler discussion.
Yeah, I'm going to try to finish it also.
Yeah, so far, very impressed. Very good.
Mm-hmm. Life came up, and we ran out of time to discuss the comic I chose. We'll get to it another time. Instead, coming up, we do discuss our recent poll on Patreon, asking what the patrons think Mulele and I do best. I'm continuing to republish classic episodes of Deconstructing Comics in reverse order, unlocked by our patrons' generous support. This week's is number 61, from February 5th, 2007, in which Brandon and I discuss the graphic novel Kingdom of the Wicked by Ian Edgington and Disraeli. The classic episodes can be found on our Facebook and Twitter feeds by choosing the earliest months listed in the sidebar pull-down menu at deconstructingcomics.com, in publicly available posts on our Patreon page, or in the Patreon smartphone app. Classic episodes have been unlocked back to number 46. You can help to unlock earlier episodes by pledging. Patrons at $2 and up get To the Batpole's outtakes, and sometimes outtakes from Deconstructing Comics. Patrons at $4 and up get extra full-length podcasts in which Mulele and I review superhero movies. We're currently discussing the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. And you can help us reach goals beyond releasing more classic episodes, including unlocking patron-only ad-free versions of Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Batpoles. No more promos for other podcasts or Patreon ads like this one, and a publicly available new podcast on the manga Fullmetal Alchemist. Check out all our goals and help us reach them at patreon.com/deconcomics.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
So recently I've started doing like polls on the Deconstructing Comics Patreon page. And on April 8th, I put up a poll, which are Tim and Mulele best at? and the choices were talking about superhero movies, graphic novels, the comics industry, creator-submitted comics, or making comics. And the first 6 votes, what I couldn't help noticing was that no one had voted for superhero movies. And I'm like, well, but you guys are the ones who have access to our superhero movie reviews. And I actually commented that I was surprised no one had chosen superhero movies. And then a 7th person voted, and they voted for superhero movies. So
is that a sympathy vote?
I don't know, maybe. But it was really... So 3 of the 7 people who voted chose creator-submitted comics. So apparently that's our strength. And so each of the other choices got 1 vote each.
Okay, it's interesting. So after working on this project of Tim catches up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and getting only 1 vote in this, do you want to continue to do this?
Well, my impression has been that at least our supporters seem more interested in simply supporting us than in the bonus content. I might be wrong about that, but the ones that I hear from say, we just wanted to support you. We like what you're doing in the free podcast, so we wanted to support you in that, which is great, and I appreciate it.
Interesting.
But, some people who have Patreon say, you got to have bonus content or nobody's going to support you. And they see it as very transactional. And I'm not sure that's always the case.
Well, one of the things I'd always heard about Patreon is to not mistake it for a Kickstarter. You're not selling a transaction, a bit of content. It's actually more like a tip jar. A monthly tip jar, but still. And the bonus content is more of a thank you than an actual part of the transaction or a part of the support or reason for support. And but the results of this poll kind of beg the question, or rather, perhaps we should put up another poll. Should Mulele and Tim continue this MCU film podcast? I mean, if no one's listening to the content, and we've put in, so far? Something like 40 hours worth of content up?
I've lost count now.
Yeah. So, I mean, at a certain point, if no one's interested...
Although I've been enjoying getting caught up on the movies, so... maybe it's just self-pleasure at this point, but I mean, I've been kind of anticipating what other superhero movies I could finally get around to watching. And also you had the idea of watching the DC Extended Universe films to see how the other half lives.
Well, I know how they live, and living is kind of generous.
Or to see the same thing that the MCU did, but done wrong.
Yeah. Well, people are still talking about the Snyder Cut, but we'll see. I'm totally fine to continue doing it, but if no one cares on the Patreon, perhaps it should go out to the rest of the world then, not as an exclusive, but just as a podcast in general. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, everybody who's listening, we'd like to hear what you think. Of course, we'd love it if you supported the Patreon, but I don't know. Particularly, I do want to ask the patrons, like, do we need to do anything? Do we just need to do the free stuff?
Well, clearly, it's much more personal and much more interesting to do the critiquing comics stuff than the MCU, which is basically yet another source of opinions on a movie that everybody's watched. And I do mean everybody, because fucking number one movie in the world.
Endgame.
Yeah, Endgame. I don't know exactly what the value is. I've always looked at the value of us talking about any of this stuff as in they're interested in what we have to say, not necessarily that we say something that is so profoundly original that people kind of stop mid-meal just to ponder.
Wow, man, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
these guys are geniuses.
Yeah, so it's not quite on that level. So I'm imagining that it's more just, okay, well, I wonder if Tim liked this movie. I wonder if Mulele has something to say here. But if it's not even that, well, what's the point? In fact, I would say my vote anyway is to expand the listening audience and put it out as a regular podcast on the feed. You've already got what, 30 episodes?
Well, let me. So yeah, what we've got on the feed, of course, there's the commentary I did with others about the first year of Amazing Spider-Man comics. But as far as our reviews, let's see. So this folder includes the Star Wars Episode 9 discussion and Spider-Man 1, along with the MCU movies from Thor 1 on. And there are 22 episodes in this folder.
Okay. So basically you're looking at about half a year's worth of content on a weekly schedule.
Yeah, it'd be about half a year, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, with that amount of material, it's basically a new podcast about a very old subject. But I have seen people do it before, where someone didn't really understand what is all this superhero stuff and dive into the movies as kind of an educational experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we did. So it could be, if you want to go that way. Otherwise, it'll just be a private conversation that's recorded and available to everyone who's a Patreon member, but no one listens to.
Yeah, that might be what it currently is. I don't know. Of course, I mean, as a patron of some other podcasts, I have not been very good about listening to the bonus content either. I have been trying to catch up on one of them, but I tend to be like, I'm too busy already. So,
yeah, well, time and you have a very complicated relationship, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not going out to my job, I'm still swamped.
Yeah.
Between my private students and doing podcast stuff. I mean, I feel just as busy as ever.
Yeah, somehow not commuting to the job. I'm telecommuting with my university and some of my students. But without the commute, I've suddenly had a feeling of, hey, with all this extra time, I could do extra things. But that's not really the case. I don't really have that much more time than I had before. So now I'm really busy too. So hence only 9 chapters of the comic we just reviewed, which is a little bit less than my usual ability to read through a comic. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I should point out for American listeners, my high school is not doing online lessons. I don't have anything to do, although allegedly I'm still going to get paid anyway. So, like,
yeah.
Why should I complain about my situation? I'm way more fortunate than some people, I guess. so far, but I'm
yeah.
not, I'm afraid, as we're recording this, supposedly the state of emergency will end on May 6th. I have no confidence that that's going to be the case.
Oh, absolutely not.
And I'm just wondering, if we're still shut down in June or July, are they still going to want to pay me for sitting at home? I don't know.
Did you sign a contract?
Yeah. So maybe by the contract they're bound to. I don't know, but
yeah, I don't know. My university contract means I get paid all year round, even though I'm only teaching half the year. It's a little bit less than you would get paid for getting paid only for the semester, but still, the total amount is I guess the same, but it's just spread over a year. So I show up, I don't show up, I get paid. In this case, I can't show up because they've delayed the semester.
Yeah.
But still, I'm getting paid. But I think it's the contract. They're bound to it, and they're gonna go through with it. And I think they understand a little bit better than America does that if they stop paying everyone, then the economy stalls out. Yeah. Without getting too political, man, that orange clown.
Yeah.
He's got no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we would like to get comics from listeners, comics that you created yourself and would like somebody to read and comment on. You can send your comic as a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of them and critique them on the show. But in the meantime, I guess we're going to be reading webcomics. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, till next time, this is Tim.
Wait a minute. Before we sign off, I do want to say that I started a Patreon. And basically, I'm developing a comic on the Patreon. Usually on Instagram and Twitter, I put up little pictures and illustrations of what I'm doing. But with this, I'm getting much more in-depth, kind of breaking down all of the inspiration methods and rules that I'm applying to the comic itself in how I create it, how I write it, what I'm attempting to do. As much as the artist of the creation can deconstruct his own work, I'm trying to do it there. But anyway, if you want to support that, or if you want to see all of that, please hit up my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Mulele Redux.
And there are no superhero movie reviews on that one, but yeah, do support
not yet.
it anyway. Well, I mean, maybe if we put it on yours, we'd get more listeners to it. Okay, so this is Tim.
And Mulele.
And thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics. Support this and all our shows by joining us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/deconcomics for more details. You can also help us out by reviewing us on Apple or any other podcast source. Do your shopping at deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon so that we get a percentage of the sale. And share our episodes on your social media. We appreciate your support in bringing Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat Poles to a larger audience. Our theme is from bensound.com. Next week on Deconstructing Comics, I interview British writer John Allison, the creator of Bad Machinery, Giant Days, and more. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics.